So today's session is going to be from brand to scale, growth marketing for climate tech companies. And it's called from brand to scale because, as you'll see throughout the presentation, that's really the methodology that we as a company apply to all of our clients that we're supporting with their marketing. But it's also because I assume that scale is exactly what you are all after if you're a founder or a marketer at a climate tech company. Because scale in our industry obviously means deploying your products or services and therefore making a bigger impact. So we're all aiming for scale. So just to say hi, and so that you know who you're talking to, as Charlotte mentioned, I'm the partner and president at Alder Co. We are a woman and minority-owned growth marketing agency that takes clients from brand to scale. My background is really global corporate B2B marketing. I've spent most of my career as a global marketing director at a large tech company out of London, doing, deep B2B marketing, selling services and products into large corporations, which is very applicable to climate tech. However, I left that career about 4 years ago because I really wanted to make an impact, and then first started consulting in climate tech and then joined Alder as a partner. I'm also a guest lecturer for climate tech marketing at Presidio Graduate School here in the Bay Area, and I am the National Marketing Chair for Clean Tech Open, which is the largest clean tech accelerator here in the US. If you haven't guessed yet from my accent, I'm German originally. I'm married to a Brit and I live in the Bay Area here in California. My other passions are zero waste. So I used to write a blog about how to live a zero waste life. It's lying dormant a little bit at the moment, but it still has some useful information if you want to check it out. I love baking, mainly German sourdough bread, and I do a bit of yoga, running, and snowboarding when I'm not advising clients on marketing. And I'm really curious where everyone else is based. So please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from. I believe we have quite an international audience, which is always really exciting. So yeah, please put that in the chat. And what we're going to go through today is really about, where should you focus your marketing as you build your climate tech business? And when we talk to early stage founders or maybe the first marketers and climate tech companies, there's often confusion or, people are unsure as to where they should focus because really there's so much to do, right? Everyone tells you, oh, get your website up, do social media, make sure you do sales outreach, do some SEO, maybe do some paid advertising. And it's really confusing. So where do you start and what's important at which stage of company development? So what we've done to add a bit of clarity to this confusion is we've taken the framework that the Rocky Mountain Institute has developed. You might have seen this. And they've really analyzed what the typical climate tech valleys of death are as a company develops. So I'm just going to take you through those, and then the whole presentation is aligned with these valleys of death. So take a note as to where you think you are as a company on this journey, and then that kind of guides you where you might want to focus your marketing at. And to the structure of this whole, because it's called Ask Me Anything, right? So I'm not just going to present for the whole hour. This is really just an introduction and a conversation starter and a bit of guidance. And it's going to take maybe 15, 20 minutes max. And then at the end, there'll be plenty of time for questions. And I've also prepared some polls to get a sense of where you are as an audience so that I can really pitch this presentation. So starting with this framework, the typical valleys of death that the Rocky Mountain Institute has identified for climate tech companies are, the first one is really, starting the startup. So forming your company, maybe spinning it out of a lab or getting an idea onto paper and into a business plan. The second value of death is where you're trying to validate that idea. So you're doing research around product market fit to see if there's really a demand for what your idea is. And then you're also starting to develop your product. And that's typically capital intensive, at least if you're a hardware or deep tech company. the third valley of death is where you're getting market validation. So, you have a product in pilot stage and you're really looking for that first pilot or your first partner. You're trying to demonstrate the technology in the real life, in the market, and getting paid for it. And then the fourth valley of death is getting from those first pilots to commercialization and really getting into a repeatable system of revenue generation. So you're moving maybe from 3 customers to 5 to 10 to 100, depending on what your product or service is. So my first poll here is, where do you see yourself on this journey? Which valley of death are you currently facing? So I'm going to launch this poll. So I hope you can see it. Is it working? All right. So that's cool. Okay. Awesome. Give maybe 1 more minute. So got some movement here on the screen. Results are still coming in. Okay. All right. Okay. So cool. I'm going to end it. I'm going to share the results. Okay. Can you see the results? All right. So we've got quite the spread. That's really exciting. Got a few people who are still in the startup formation stage. Quite a few people in the middle of the valleys. So I feel for you because I think they're really tough. And then some that are kind of on the way out. So that's also really exciting. And I'm really happy that we have such a spread because I believe we have something useful for everyone. Okay. How do I get this off my screen? Maybe. Okay. First valley of death, startup formation. What should you be doing in terms of marketing at this stage? Because you don't really have much more than just an idea. And so it's really about winning people for your idea to join you either as your co-founder or maybe as the first couple of employees, or you're trying to find your first angel investors, or you're maybe trying to find a lab where you can start developing your product. So what do you need at this stage? Because you don't really have much you can talk about yet. So there it's really important to start establishing your brand. And that might be counterintuitive because you might think, oh, I don't really need a brand if I don't have anything yet. But the brand is the only thing that's going to attract people to you. So as early as you can, try and be really clear about your vision. What are you trying to achieve? Your mission? Why are you doing this? Your values, like who are you as a person and what do you want the company to stand for? And then if you can, start trying to get some early words on paper, like who you are, what do you do, which problem do you solve, and how. I know this will change as you develop your company, but it's just good to try and be consistent from the beginning. And also, if you have your values down, this is really what will influence how you act as a company. And ultimately, all these different touch points, how people perceive you, maybe in early networking meetings, when you try and pitch your company to get into some accelerators. If everything you do is aligned with your values, this is what will create the brand. Because the brand is much more than just a logo on a page. It's really the gut feeling that people get when they think about you and your company. Okay, second valley of death. This is when you're developing your product and you're trying to prove product market fit. And if you're reading, startup literature and how to do books, or if you're going through accelerators, people will always tell you do customer discovery, obviously. And that is really important. You really want to validate what do your potential customers need? What are their problems? How can you solve that problem? How do they think about the market? All those things are super important. But one tip I would give you at this stage is, rather than just asking questions, really listen out for the questions you're getting in return. So what might happen if you have a customer discovery conversation is, you're talking to someone and you're trying to explain what you do and you're asking them a question, but actually they ask you a clarifying question in return because they don't really understand what you just told them or what your product might be. So really listen out for those questions because they inform what you need to tell people about your company at the early stage. And then once you've done, so moving on to the right part of the slide, once you've done your customer discovery, you're a lot clearer about the problem that your customers are experiencing, how your product solves that problem. But we want to really listen out for the pain, like why is this a real serious problem for them? And then how does your product solve the problem in an actionable way? And this is really what you're trying to articulate in the early stages. Be really clear on the problem. Why is this causing a pain? How does your product or service solve the problem? And how can you make it actionable for them? Okay, third valley of death, which is when you have your products, you've kind of validated product market fit, and you're really trying to get your first pilot. And assuming you've got your first pilot, use that as a treasure trove for content. Document everything you do around this pilot. How did you find your partner? How did you work together on the pilot? What did you learn? How did you resolve problems that came up throughout? And what was the result for your customer? What are the benefits? How was your product working? Is it working as expected, or did you actually learn something that made you pivot? Collect all of that and then create your first case study. I mean, if you're a marketer, you know how important this is, because case studies, you can really use them across everything. You can use them on your website and sales, for PR. You can co-present with your customer. It adds a lot of credibility to what you're trying to do, and it helps attract your next pilots, because then they will see, okay, someone like me, has already worked with this company and they got results from it, so maybe I should try it too. I have an example here. It's a company called 75F. They're based out of Minneapolis. They do building automation and optimization. Go to their website and check out how they present case studies. It's really great. And here is my second poll, probably for the people who are sort of in the middle of the journey. Hang on. Okay, I'm curious about case studies. So have you created any customer case studies yet? Maybe not yet. Maybe you're just working on your first one. Maybe you have a couple, or you're really an expert. You already have a library of case studies on your website and you can search them, via industry, via product. Okay. Okay, if you're multitasking and you're interested in following this webinar, take a look at your screen, because there's a poll and we're really curious to get your answers. Okay, thank you. Some people woke up. Okay, great. Okay, results are coming in. Okay, awesome. I'm gonna end it and share the results. Okay, so quite a few are like at the not yet stage. So I don't know whether that means you don't have your pilots yet, or you just haven't written your case study yet. Either way is fine. Working on your first one, congratulations, that's amazing. You've bagged your pilot and you're already on the way to use it in your marketing. And then one person has a couple. Well done. So you should probably start thinking about how are you going to use those in your marketing. Okay. Okay. Last value of death, scaling up. And, given we don't have that many people in the audience that are at that stage, I'm probably going to keep this very high level. There's a lot of information in here, and this is really the core of what we do at Alder as a growth marketing agency, is really getting into that, repeatable system for lead generation so that you can get more business. I'm just going to touch on the high level building blocks for this part. And the reason I'm putting all of these things on here, so personas, customer journey, content, and channels, is because even in B2B, which I assume most of your companies are in, research says that around 70% of the B2B customer journey is complete before your salespeople get involved. So people who are looking to solve a problem and who are looking to buy a product like yours do 70% of their research online before they ever even get in touch with the company. So it's like, like you shop as a person for your personal life, you research reviews, you check Amazon reviews, you talk to your friends maybe, but you never really reach out to the company, you go to the store until you've really made a buying decision. And this trend is really replicated in B2B. So you really want to be where your customers are online. And to get there, there's this framework that has all of these elements. And I'm going to just touch on each of those briefly. So the first thing you really want to do, if you haven't already, and it's kind of a continuation of your customer discovery, is really develop your buyer personas. So who are the people at your customers that are going to buy your product or who are influencing the buying decision? And you want to go quite deep. You want to create them with actionable attributes. So what is their role in the organization? As I mentioned, are they the decision maker, or do they influence the decision, or will they be the end user of your product? What is their title? What are their goals, both from an organizational perspective, but also personally? What are their career goals, and how might your product or solution help them raise their profile within their organization? What are their pain points, and how can your product solve them? Why would they reject your services or products? And how would their life be different if they had your product? Who influences them? Who do they influence? And then how do they get their information? And you get this information by basically doing another round of customer discovery. You want to talk to existing customers or prospects. You also want to talk to your sales team. You might want to do some third-party research, just try and get answers to those questions and really just plot it down on paper, have descriptions of these people, because that will really inform what content you want to create. The next step is think about the customer journey that these personas will go through as they make their buying decision. And you've probably seen this, heard this. Typically, it's called, I think, discovery and evaluation decision or something. We call it slightly different just because we think it's more actionable this way, but it doesn't really matter. And try and identify the questions that your personas are asking as they are moving through the journey. So discover stage is really where they are just aware of their problem, or not even quite aware what their problem is. So they know they have a gut feeling something's not working, they need to solve something, but they don't really understand yet what the problem is or how it's caused, or how it manifests itself, what the impacts are. So this is a very educational stage. This is where people are kind of lost and they ask questions like, okay, what is it that I don't know? Or what is really my problem? Or is anyone else in my industry, my peers, are they facing the same problem? You want to present yourself as a helpful brand and company and help them shape their problem. Because if you go straight in with the solution, you might not really catch them. They might go off in a completely different direction. So consider stage, this is once they've understood their problem and they really start to look for solutions. And this is where you can help them shape, okay, if you have that problem, this is how you might start solving it. And the questions they might be asking themselves is, how can I solve this problem? Who's leading in this field? How do these products that solve this problem, how do they work? And how would it improve my situation? And how much is it? And then the justify stage is, imagine they've done their research and they have a short list of potential suppliers or providers that they're going to buy from to solve their problem. And you're lucky enough that you made it onto the short list. Well done, because you're a startup and you're probably competing against some more established companies. So this is all about de-risking the decision to work with you, because you are a startup. And why would a really well-established large company like a utility or a car manufacturer, why would they choose to work with you? So they would ask questions like, hey, is this even a proven solution? Or has anyone else worked with them before. This is where your case studies come in, remember? Okay, what's the ROI that I can expect from this? Or can I try out this product or service? And by getting to those questions, this really guides what content you want to develop to answer those questions. So this is where I have my next poll. I'm really curious if you think about the content that your company has produced, to inform your customers or the market about what you do. Where do you think does most of your content sit along this journey or along the funnel? Just show of hands. Okay, so looking at the customer journey and your content, where does most of your content sit? And you can really think about it. Discover stage is just really educational, informationally. It doesn't really talk about you or your product or your company. Consider stage is that really content that talks about you and your product. And then justify stage is really about adding credibility to what you're doing and making it easier for people to do business with you. All right. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, 2 more seconds and I'm going to close the poll. All right. So this I find really surprising because, okay, so, majority of you think that your content sits on the discover stage and then almost as many on the consider stage and then, justify stage. Typically what we see with early stage startups is that they really focus on the consider stage. So they talk about themselves a lot and they really neglect the discover stage and the justify stage. So I'm really excited to see that a lot of you have discover stage content, which is educational, talks about the industry, the problems. That's really awesome because that's how you get people into the pipeline. All right. So once you've done that, then you can do a content audit. And basically what you do is you match your content to those questions and see where you have gaps. And then you start developing content to answer those questions. And on that note, I would just say, really think about how do people find your content? And is it actionable? And, can you gate it for lead generation if that's the stage you're at? Is it so valuable that people are willing to trade their contact details for it? So if you put it all together, this framework, you end up with something that we call a campaign architecture, and you kind of think how people would move through that funnel. So, you have your persona and they have, at the discovery stage, they wonder about their challenge, and then they might read a byline that you've placed in the media, and then, that spurs them on to research further. They go to your website, they download a white paper, which is all about maybe the 10 most pressing problems for utilities in 2023, very educational. They find that content really useful. So, then they start checking you out on your website because clearly you know what you're talking about and you have some potential solutions for that problem. You make it onto their shortlist and maybe they will attend a webinar or an event. They might read your case studies, or they might even talk to your existing customers to get some references. And ultimately they'll end up buying your product if everything goes well. Here's an example from my previous life, how we brought such an approach to life. So this was an integrated PR and marketing campaign that won some awards. It was in a different industry, but it was B2B, so it's very applicable. The topic was how basically, and it's very relevant now, how do chatbots and AI, how can they run local government and help, residents help with their queries? But this was at a time when not many people were talking about AI yet. So first we did a survey amongst local government officials to ask them, hey, are you even aware of AI and chatbots and all that kind of stuff? This was really good because it kind of gave us some customer discovery insights too. Then we put that into a survey report that we sent back to the government officials. So that gave us kind of the second touch point. We used the results from the survey in PR and got some really great media coverage from that. We used the insights to create a white paper, which was more like a how-to kind of guide. If you're looking at AI, how do you implement it in local government? Then we did a webinar, we hosted some events around it, and eventually, we did like an in-person event, a roundtable with some government officials. We invited people who had completed the survey. We invited everyone who had downloaded the white paper. So, overall, lots of touch points for people across the campaign. It generated over 300 leads, over 10 hot sales conversations, and it won us 2 new customers. Okay, so just summarizing, think about where you are on your journey. What value of death are you facing? First one, focus on brand, vision, mission, and values. Second one, really focus on customer discovery and try and get some insights from your interviews that you're doing. Third one, focus on your case study and use it for storytelling. And then fourth one, move on to that repeatable system for lead generation using personas, channels, content. Okay, that was a really high level overview of where we think you can focus as you go through your journey. We do have another resource, which is Tofu, which is a community for climate tech founders and marketers. It's all about climate tech marketing. It's a bi-weekly newsletter and then a Slack community. I'm going to post the link in the chat after I stop sharing. Would be great if you can join. It's really great to get insights, advice from other marketers. Post your questions there. Community is super helpful. And then, okay, somehow that slide has the logos have disappeared. Doesn't matter. Yeah, please connect with me, and then I think we can move on to questions.
Yeah, we already have a couple of questions. I just posted the link to Tofu. I'm in the community. It's a great Slack community, vibrant, great newsletter too, super insightful. Yeah, thanks everyone for posting your questions. So we can start with the first one. Natalie is asking, should you create a case study if the pilot wasn't exactly as successful as you want it to be? And Natalie, feel free to add context on that if you'd like. No worries if not.
Yeah, I can add some context. So yeah, if you have a pilot that, you learned a lot and you do want to highlight it, but maybe it didn't get the best results that you wanted. So how do you balance, wanting to showcase a pilot, but at the same time, not wanting to turn off your potential customers because of kind of some results? I guess, yeah. So I'm just struggling with do I release the pilot or do I keep it to myself?
I think that's a great question. And, I think you're not alone. It is highly likely that this is the outcome of your first pilot because you're still learning, right? You're co-developing your solution with your first pilot customers. So I would say it just depends how you frame it. Frame it as a co-creation and learning opportunity. And just focus on how you collaborated and what you learned with your customer. Because those are also really helpful insights. Mm-hmm. I think the benefit of showing a brand that was willing to work with you, supersedes the worries that you have about results.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Great question, Natalie. Glad you could make it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cooper at Quit Carbon is asking, do companies that sell to consumers need case studies?
Again, great question. And yeah, I would say yes. I mean, it's the same. So what case studies do is really they instill trust. And even if it's just another consumer, someone else trusted you and they had a great result from working with you. So yes, you probably tell them in a different way. It's not like hey, this was the challenge, this is the solution, and these are the results. We have that like B2B kind of sometimes boring framework that we use for case studies. I think with consumers, you have the opportunity to really tell a great story. How did it impact their life? How did it change? I don't know what the product is or the solution, but you can really humanize it in B2C, which I think is a great opportunity. And you can use it on social, you can just be a lot more playful with it in B2C.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions or even comments?
Hello, this is Mike. One question I have for you, Bettina, is certainly in the climate space, if everyone's starting out and they've got some pretty tight budgets, what's your range? Like what number do you say no, or how do you qualify the value that you bring if someone doesn't have a full up marketing budget to leverage?
Okay, great question, but really hard to answer because, I don't know your situation, or, it's really, I think you look at how you should prioritize and what is important at what stage of your journey, and then like do the things you can do with the few resources that you have. I know if you're a founder, you have a million things you need to do, and it's really hard to then sit down and write a blog post or something. But maybe you've noticed, every time you're having your first sales conversations, you're always getting the same question. So that's a real strong indicator that maybe you should address that question through your marketing. And maybe that is a blog post, or even if you don't have time to write it down, maybe you can get on a webinar somewhere or do a podcast and try and answer that question. And then you have an audio file that you can post on your website. Just be a bit creative and playful. Yeah, and I would say while you're still in sort of customer discovery or product market fit phase, we actually don't encourage early stage companies to spend that much money on foundational things because you are still pivoting, So do the basics, try and do those right. Like, I assume you have a very basic website, but on that, at least make sure your values are clear, your vision and your mission is clear. You have your team portrayed because your team carries credibility. Maybe you make sure you have your advisors or your early investors on there. Everything that adds credibility at the early stages is really important. And those things don't typically cost that much money.
Thank you.
I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a broad question.
Yeah.
It is broad, but so important.
Also, Charlotte, by the way, I know you're a marketer,
Yes.
so feel free to chip in if you have any other advice.
I have my ClimateRaise hat, so
okay.
And so I'm all good. And you're the expert here. So I'm also learning, which is great. We have another question from Natalie. What's the best ratio of content needed for each customer journey stage?
Oh, excellent question. Very tactical, but I love it. Okay, so really you want to go back to those key customer questions that are, that come up in each journey stage, and just try and get a sense of which are the ones that always come up in your conversations. And then, try and answer the top 2 or 3, I would say. And, not every answer is a blog post. You can answer them in different ways. As I said, you might want to offer a webinar where you address that, or you can, maybe do a series of social posts, or just, have a paragraph on your website that addresses those questions. And then think about, conversion, as in how does that question lead to the next step? So you also want to think about, okay, if I answer that question, you don't really want them to just be satisfied and go away, right? You want them to take the next action. So also think about either what's the next piece of content I can offer, to get them through the funnel, or can I get them to convert as a lead? Like, can I get them to download something, or maybe sign up to your newsletter so that you get their email address and you can start nurturing them as part of the sales process.
We have a question from Brigitte. How do you feel about the real value of white papers? In our experience, we have found people simply don't read them, other than analysts or media. I realize it depends on the industry, but would love to hear your opinion.
Yes, great question. And I think after death by PowerPoint, death by white paper is probably the second most cause of death in B2B. So, I think they need to be really actionable and useful, and then they can work. So don't write 20 or 40 pages high level about the technology. As you said, no one's interested. It's not helpful. But if, as part of your key customer questions, you come across a question like, okay, I kind of know how I need to solve. I kind of know what my problem is and what the solution is, but I just don't know how to go about it. That is a great angle for a white paper, because and then I wouldn't even call it a white paper. It's really a how-to guide. It's like a 10-step guide to get from A to B. People love that kind of stuff. And then it's really heavy with advice, with graphics, with checklists. It's kind of hand-holding people through a process. And it's maybe, it's 10 pages max. That content works really well, but, if it's just a quite generic industry white paper, I agree, it really doesn't work. I'm also curious if anyone else in the audience has experience with it. So please pop it in the chat if you have any other advice.
Ning is asking, do you have any advice around marketing carbon credits?
Honestly, I don't on the top of my head. It's an area we don't work in currently. I know it's are you asking, like, is it a platform business where you need supply and demand? So that's often tricky and a challenge. I think with carbon credits, trust is a really big issue. So anything you can do around, your verifications, your additionality, and then, think about who your buyer is too. Is it the corporate social responsibility person? I think everything that is in corporate social responsibility, whether it's like building optimization or carbon credits, it's just really complex with the personas you're dealing with. You usually have the CSR person who's the champion, but ultimately they don't hold the budget or they're not the decision maker. So you really need to help them educate their internal stakeholders. So I think it's really content around education and credibility and trust, and present it in a way that they can use it internally. I don't know if that was helpful, because it was also quite a high level question.
We have 2 questions in the chat, and I see Zach raised his hand. So Ted in the chat is asking, what are some indications of not the right target audience versus not the right content?
Okay, great question. I would say the right target audience is really informed by your strategy. I think you need to start there. It goes back to product market fit and who's buying your product. So make sure you have the target audience nailed first. And if you're sure on that and you feel like your content isn't resonating, then go back and ask them. Do some more customer discovery. Try and really nail those key customer questions down and then try and answer them. Or it might be a channel problem. Maybe it's not resonating because you're not on the right channel, or you're not presenting it in the right format. It might not be easily accessible. So always ask questions about where do they get their information from, and then really try and be in that channel.
Corina is asking, how do you deliver a consistent, concise personal brand when exploring 2 very different startup ideas in different industries for different types of customers.
Okay, can you repeat the beginning of the question?
Yeah. How do you deliver a consistent, concise personal brand when exploring two different startup ideas?
Okay, so I guess you're trying to get two startups off the ground at the same time, and you're the founder. I don't know, maybe you can unmute yourself and give a bit of context.
Sure, thank you, Bettina. Yeah, so there's two ideas that I'm in early discovery on. I'm not sure which one is going to end up sticking to the wall, as it were. And so, but in the process of doing the discovery on these two things, I'm reaching out to two very different sets of people, which of course can be confusing if they come and try to understand a little bit more about me and what I'm doing. So right now I just haven't really publicized too much about either of them, but I know that I'm going to need to help get more traction with the target audience and with the stakeholders, etc. So I have to sort of figure out, okay, well, do I continue to pursue two, or do I choose just one? And it's like choosing between children, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if that's a marketing problem, really. I mean, I think maybe just going back to the personal brand, I would say just be you. That's the strongest brand. I mean, that sounds very cliche, but you yourself, how you are and what you represent as a founder is incredibly valuable no matter which idea you pursue. That's what I would say about the personal brand. And then, which one you go with, I would say also be upfront and transparent about it. Say, you're at this stage, you're pursuing several ideas. You really want to get input on both so that you can make a very informed decision. And then just use the customer discovery and the feedback you're getting from the market to make that decision.
Thank you, Bettina.
Would be my view. I don't know. Maybe others have other thoughts. But good for you. I mean, amazing that you have two ideas that are both worth pursuing. It's a great problem to have, but yeah, go for it. We're rooting for you. Okay, Zach, maybe?
Zach, yeah.
Hi there. Thank you both. Thank you, Bettina. Thank you, Charlotte, for your time. Yeah, we're in the business of helping people go electric, and that's cars. And what we do is we create the data. It's highly personalized for them, and it's all automatic, and it's an app. Right now, when talking to investors, they immediately get scared because what they see is a B2C product, and they think, okay, you've got to go out and you've got to get users, and that's just going to be capital inefficient. So that's half a question, which is, what are some of the things you can do about that? Because of that problem, we have actually thought, how do you do this capital efficient? And in part, what it does is it involves using the B2B side, where all the monetization happens, and who are sat, shall we say, on the marketplace or the platform to which the app connects. So that what you're trying to do is create a virtuous circle where the B2B's customer base is what's used to create a new revenue stream. And I'm thinking, is there a more elegant way or a faster way of trying to, because obviously you're very knowledgeable, so judging by your nodding, you're kind of getting where this is coming from. But sometimes you have to explain things to people in like 5 seconds or minus 5 seconds, and it's trying to get these things together. That was one half, yeah. And the other half was, what are some of the things that one can try to ameliorate or address capital inefficiencies when trying to get B2C?
Okay, so upfront, I'm really a B2B expert, as you might have, guessed from my presentation. So I'm not a B2C expert, but I think you kind of alluded to it by mentioning the B2B and marketplace side. I think partnering is really key. You know, can you work with partners that are more established in the industry that already have a path to those consumers to get in front of them? Would be my view.
And what are some of the sort of concerns that one might want to, you know, front run or address to verbalize before it becomes kind of a mental issue when talking to a B2B and trying to persuade them or trying to tell them that it's their existing customer base that can create a whole new revenue stream or opportunity? As an example, a dealership has a database of both existing customers who bought their last car from them, as well as prior customers, you know, usually going back years. Typically, they send boring and staid email shots. So it's about being able to offer something new and different, as well as
okay, so like how do you
utility.
convince them to open their database to you and like to co-market to them, right? Is that the question?
Yes, that's the question that someone who knows what these words these expressions are. Yeah.
Well, you know, sometimes I think you need to start at so you need to kind of I think you need to approach it from two sides. One, very high level, do some mission alignment work. You know, are you ultimately all trying to achieve the same thing? That's kind of the first step to like win their hearts and minds. And then like you go to the other end of the scale and you get very specific around how does it benefit their customers and how does it benefit them? You know, like, does it make their customers' lives easier? Does it create customer loyalty for them? Does it create return revenue for them? So, you know, kind of a two-pronged approach, I would say. But as I said, I'm not an expert in that space.
Yeah, but there's that overlap with the B2B and, you know, trying to appeal to their customers and adding value. But yes, thank you very much.
Good luck. Sounds exciting.
Thank you.
Great. So I think we have, let's try to address the three last questions. So Erica is asking, during the justify phase of the journey, what are some other things to consider? For context, we're introducing technology and a process that is new to a legacy industry. We're struggling to think about how much and what types of education to deliver to our audience.
Okay. So maybe just to clarify, so education, I would probably see like at the beginning of the journey where you like creating a new market and you're explaining everything around the technology and what it does and why it's useful. Justify is then really like, why you? And so, you know, it's other ways to create credibility is anything that comes from a third party. So we talked about case studies and that's your customers and that's obvious, but there are tons of other things, you know, your investors add credibility, your advisors. If you manage to get into the media and a reputable media source, that adds credibility. If you've won some awards, if you have some industry accreditations, or even if you have data, you know, just data that proves ROI or data that really proves whatever it is, emissions reductions, you know, because data doesn't lie. So just really try and build that set of content that adds that credibility and trust. And, you know, the other thing might be just open up and give people the opportunity to get to know you. I mean, that, you know, every startup can do that, but I'm sure you're really great people who know their stuff. So, you know, just giving people more of a chance to get to know you can also help.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Great question.
Birgit, I see you have a hand raised.
I do. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I wanted to actually, since Bettina, you invited more comments on what Karina was talking about, I'd like to offer a comment because I'm kind of in the same place and I've been dealing with basically all of my professional life. And I think that probably all of us will at some point, because, you know, when you talk about your personal brand, what that really means is that we're not monochrome individuals. We all have something else that we do that we love, that we're passionate about. In my case, my personal brand is literature. I'm a literary author. And you would say, what in the world are you doing in this meeting? And what are you doing in climate tech, right? And so the reasons are many. I mean, I care about the planet. I'm passionate. I'm a huge foodie. You know, I judge chocolate, all of these things. So that's my personal brand. And I don't make any apologies for it. In fact, I celebrate it. And so I would encourage, you know, Karina, you and anyone else, don't hide it. Let the world know this is who you are. And if you're doing a startup, awesome, you know, and how does your personal brand or how do your passions support that brand? I think that can be a strength rather than a quandary. So I just wanted to share that.
I love that. Thank you, Bridget. Amazing comment. Totally underline that.
Mhm.
Yep, same. So maybe we have 1 more minute for the last question, and then we can end the meeting. Eleanor is asking, how do you typically think about paid ads during the early stages of a company, like values, goals, phase, etc.?
Yeah, great question. I mean, ideally, I need some context around what industry you're in. If you're in B2B, you know, it's like, what's the purpose for the ad? Is it just to create brand visibility? Is it, I don't know, to generate leads? You know, and that's, so I would be, to be honest, I'd be cautious, you know, like what, if you have a very specific purpose, say, you're doing a very targeted webinar and you know exactly which companies and which type of people from those companies you want to attend the webinar, and you have a partner who's more known and more credible than you know, you can use ads to promote that webinar. If you have a white paper, but you know, you're an early stage company, you don't have a great website, you have like 500 followers on LinkedIn. So that's why we call our approach brand to scale, because we really only get to the scaling part once the brand is in place. You know, everything of your brand needs to show professionalism and credibility before things like lead generation really work. And so, you know, I don't know what you're thinking about in terms of digital ads, but just be really clear on your purpose, what you're trying to achieve, how you can measure it. Are you very clear on who you're targeting? Is the platform you're using allowing you to target? Then go for it. But don't do any like general brand building or anything. I don't think it's worth at the early stages. Do other things like use your amazing employees to share their expertise on social media. You know, that doesn't cost anything and it's a lot more effective.
Awesome. Well, we're right on time. Thank you so much, Bettina. Thank you for your insights, and thank you everyone who joined and asked questions for this great chat here. I saw discussions between folks, so feel free to connect with us, with Bettina. I dropped the tofu and her LinkedIn on the chat. We are also going to send the recording to everyone. And if you have feedback on how we can make this better, please reach out, or even for like ideas for a next event.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you everyone for joining. It was such a great crew. I really enjoyed your questions, very insightful, and I'm very excited about what you're all building and wishing you the best of luck.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day and evening.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.